everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pep Talk, the persuasive evangelism podcast from Solus. I'm Gavin Matthews from Solus, and I'm joined as ever by my co-host, Steve Osmond. Steve, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It does feel like someone's opened the fridge again here in Scotland today. You know, the sun came out for about 2 days and then it was all a trick. So here we are, freezing cold.
You put your voice back. Last time I spoke to you, you'd just come back from the campus mission at Glasgow and your voice was shredded. You sound a bit hoarse.
Yes, it has recovered. It has recovered. You know, I'm able to sing again on Sunday morning, which is great. So yes, it's back.
Wonderful. Pep Talk is always about the guests that we have on and the way that they are sharing the Christian faith in our culture and our society today. And meeting new guests is always the highlight of these programs. And I'm really delighted to introduce this fortnight, Andy Frost. Andy, how are you doing?
Hi there, guys. Great to be with you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Great. And where are you dialing into us today from? Where in the country?
In South London, so London Borough of Merton, kind of Wimbledon area. So I should be good at tennis, but I'm not. But yeah, that kind of region of the country.
Now, somebody sent me a link to your website a few months ago, said, have you seen this? And I hadn't. And when I clicked on it, the Share Jesus International website, I thought, wow, this is amazing. We need to get this guy on Pep Talk because the stuff you're doing was really encouraging and really exciting. But for people like me a few months ago who had never come across Share Jesus International, who are you? What do you do? And what's your role within the organization?
So I'm the director of a charity called Share Jesus, and basically we try and communicate the gospel message relevantly and faithfully. Recently, we've had a bit of a change in how we do things. Historically, we've done lots of kind of one-off training days around the country in different places. But over the last couple of years, we've been working much more intentionally with churches over a 2-year period to have them really explore and contextualize what gospel sharing looks like in their community. So it's been a bit of a shift for us recently. And we're working with 9 churches so far, just taken another 5 churches in the last few weeks and to go on this 2-year journey. It's been really encouraging, actually, when we work alongside a church over a couple of years, just to really see how we can shift the kind of culture around the church.
Great. Yeah, so I mean, Gavin passed on the website to me as well just recently in the last few days in leading up to this podcast, and I spent a good long while just clicking through things. I was like, this is brilliant. This is just so in line with what we at Solus are all about as well. Just to, really trying to equip people, and I think one of the things that we've seen is a lot of maybe looking around at the culture, looking at the state of the world, looking at the state of the church in many instances, people finding themselves in this place where it seems the church in many ways has lost its heart for mission. It's gone cold in some ways. And so the question kind of comes about, how can we reignite that? Can that be reignited? And I think that's very much in line with what you guys do. One of the projects that I came across is the Emmaus Road project that seems to be sort of in line with that. Could you sort of explore that a bit and tell us more about that?
Yeah, this is kind of 2-year journey we're doing with churches. We often find that we work in churches that are either are kind of stagnant or kind of slowly growing or in decline. So if you're already booming, then it's not for you. But it's really to come alongside those that are kind of got a bit stuck. I think over the last 20 years, the church has taken a various few knocks in different places. I think 20 years ago, the new atheist thing was a massive thing that knocked a lot of confidence. And I think even recently, there's been other kind of challenges in the church and the headlines and things. So a lot of it's about giving the Christians confidence to work out, actually, how do I share my faith? What is the right thing to be doing and saying? And so I launched our church down in Yeovil on the weekend. And I spoke very briefly about the idea of breathing in and breathing out. I love the idea that in Luke 4, 5, and 6, Jesus does some incredible, miraculous and beautiful things, but he also spends time alone with the Father. And this simple idea of breathing in, being alone with the Father, remembering who we are and whose we are, and breathing out, looking for opportunities in the everyday. I think a lot of Christians feel a lot of pressure that it's all about them, but really, actually, we can't convert anybody. Only God can transform and change someone's life. But our job is just to really share at the right moment, kind of what we've personally discovered about God, what it means for our own lives. And as we drop these things into conversation, we just see where they go. But a lot of it's been about how do we encourage Christians to become more intentional in the everyday to look for those opportunities.
Mm. So the Emmaus Road project is a 2-year project with churches, and you've got 9. How far through the journey of 2 years are you with those 9, and how are things looking?
So the first 9 almost finished now. So I mean, the first 3 we took on. mean, across the 9 churches over the last year, there were 65 baptisms, which is really encouraging, and people are coming to faith. A lot of it, the church is already doing some incredible things already. It's just helping to join things up a little bit more. So we often talk about 2 things. It's first of all, is how do we do kind of cultural change? So how do we encourage every Christian to work out how they could become more kind of intentional and faithful in sharing their faith? And the second thing, we call it scaffolding. So when you have some work done in your home, you might have scaffolding put up. It's very expensive normally, and they fix different parts of your home and they rearrange it accordingly. Well, the scaffolding is the things that we do as church. It could be a social action project. It could be an event we run, a parent and toddler group. And thinking through how do we create pathways or journeys for those who want to explore the Christian faith. This is a very kind of clear way forward so they can do that going forward for themselves.
I remember reading a book years ago called Outgrowing the Ingrown Church. It's a story of an American pastor called Jack Miller who had a church which had kind of, like an ingrown toenail, gone the wrong way, and how God turned it around and made it an outward-focused, growing church. Have you seen that sort of thing happening?
Yeah, we have. I mean, across all different 9 churches so far, the ones we start with now, again, I think even just by talking about evangelism, talking about faith sharing, it just kind of raises the profile. That simple thing. We often do a survey with the church before, during, and afterwards, just kind of track the change in people's opinions and understandings of faith sharing. And again, just doing that initial questionnaire, it sparks them thinking, oh, yeah, I should be doing more of this. And, oh, yeah, what could I do differently? One of the game changers for us has been a real simple thing called prompt. I like the idea of habits, and that culture is shaped by our habits. And our habit is 3 things. It's the cue, the action, and the reward. So when I wake up in the morning, the cue is I wake up. The action is I put on the kettle and have a cup of coffee. The reward is I feel awake. Like a very simple thing of cue, action, reward. When it comes to faith sharing, I'm not always sure we know when is the cue, what is the action, what do we actually say, and what is the reward, what is success. So very simply, with this thing called prompt, it's basically a question each week. On a Sunday morning, you take out these cards we've created, and there's 52 different cards there, one for each week of the year. And somebody from the congregation chooses one of those cards and has got a challenge for the church to do. And so during the week, everyone in the congregation has a go at doing that thing. And then the following Sunday, you share how it's gone. So the cue is these cards. The actions during the week, what might I do to begin to respond to this card in some way? And the reward is sharing, not necessarily someone coming to faith straight away, but what have you done to become more obedient in looking out for that Holy Spirit prompt to see how you might share something of the gospel?
That's fantastic. And so you mentioned you do these questionnaires, and so as Solus, we do the same kind of not the questionnaires, but training and trying to get people more equipped for evangelism, growing their confidence. But from those questionnaires, assuming that this info is in there, what are some of the big hurdles or the big obstacles or the fears? What are the things holding people back from sharing their faith more readily? And what, through your time spent with churches, equipping them, are some of the most successful ways to help people overcome those fears and anxieties?
I mean, every church is unique and different, really, and it depends on kind of where they're at as a congregation. So some it's been about actually how do I put my faith into words. So one of the things we've done recently is a big piece of research looking at practicing Christians and how they share their faith. And there's a piece of research called Faith Sharing Profiles. What we've done is we've kind of dug into some of the undergirding kind of challenge people have around it all. Is it about somebody saying yes to Jesus, or is it about a journey they gradually go on? The second one, is it my personal role, or is it what we do as a corporate body? So is it what I have to do by myself, or is it what I do when I'm with the church, the congregation? The third is, do we start with the message, or do we start with the person? So do I work out the message? How quickly can I get the message over to the other person? Or am I trying to work out what is happening in this person's life and how I might begin to relate the gospel to them? And the fourth thing is it in words or is it in action? And we all say it's all 4 of these kind of tensions as both and, but actually we tend to have a leaning either way as Christians. So we do a little quiz online and you find out how people normally approach faith sharing. And from there, we can first of all say, you haven't got to be somebody else. God has created you who you are. Don't try and be Billy Graham, or don't try and be like somebody else, but be who God has called you to be. But when you work at how we'll generally approach faith sharing, there's something always there to celebrate. There's also something there to kind of challenge them and think about how they might do things differently going forward. So I think this kind of piece of research really helpful. It helps people understand what perhaps is their general way of approaching faith sharing and how can it become slightly more intentional going forward. So that helps to eliminate some of those fears and to give us an understanding of what it might mean for them personally to share their faith.
And so if somebody listening to this says, oh, I need to do that, where can they find that faith sharing questionnaire and how can they fill it out? And what's the most useful way to sort of use the results that come back from that?
So on the website, if you go to the faith sharing profiles on sharejesusinternational.com, you can do the quiz yourself and see how it goes. And then you'll get your profile back. But you can also download the other 5 profiles. It actually comes up with 6 different profiles, really. So look at how you're doing it, and it'll give you something to really celebrate, something to challenge you perhaps going forwards. Then we've done it as a church. We again see as a church, you begin to see different shapes of different churches. Is that certain churches have more of one type of personality than another, or vice versa. So again, having that understanding of actually who's in your congregation is really helpful. To think through what is the best way to equip our church in being faithful and sharing their faith.
In terms of sort of leaning into your strengths rather than beating yourself up about who you're not.
Exactly. So the one church, they did loads of great stuff, events every year, and they were really into their events. And they found it very hard getting people from the church to invite their friends to these events. And we discovered, we did this kind of profile test, is that the mission team who organised all the events, all of them were team players. So they're all about the corporate activities, how they saw faith showing. The rest of the church wasn't like them. And so that's why there was a kind of disconnect, because those who really liked doing events and saw it as being a team exercise were different to the rest of the congregations. Being able to unpack those nuances then begins to give people permission to work out, actually, how do we best support those who don't share their faith in this way with the right tools to go and do that.
That's very, very interesting.
Yeah, that makes me just think of what you see through the book of Acts, and the way that, so Peter, when he engages, I think it's in Acts 2, engaging the Jews, the Jewish audience anyway, he approaches them in a very specific way. And then later you get to Acts 17, where Paul's there in the Areopagus speaking to the Greeks, and again, a very different approach. And then even later on, when I think it's Paul before the king, and he's in that legal setting, and he's contextualizing the message. He's understanding his audience. He's listened to what's going on around him. And it makes me just think of something you mentioned a moment ago, where it's not, here's this message. I have to quickly just try and leap into, here it is, this, cookie cutter, one size fits all. What is have you seen, or in what ways do you think we can better be doing that? Just understanding the culture around us better, so we can connect with people, find, touch points, points of contact to share the gospel.
I think a lot of it is just about asking better questions. I think generally we don't just come at it with actually what are we going to share, but how do we first of all really pray for the person? Second of all, how do we really love the person? And then third of all, how do we ask better questions that are really interesting about them as a person, what's going on in their lives? So met the guy at the bar the week and just asked him what are his hopes and dreams for his life. Suddenly unpacks a whole bunch of things about his upbringing, about his aspirations, and you begin to work out how does the gospel connect to him in this moment. And it's great to pray with him off that conversation. So it's looking for those things that take us deeper. So people of other faiths, I love to ask them, how do you pray and what happens when you pray? And normally it gets the response back, well, how do you pray and what happens when you pray? So we begin to have then a conversation about prayer. So I think a lot of it is about working out how do we begin to go beyond the superficial stuff, beyond how bad our weather is and how bad Man United are doing, and think more about actually the kind of deeper things of life. So I think a lot of it is about being bolder in our questions and just seeing what God might bring to the surface.
And you mentioned prayer. I saw on your website there's a whole tab, a whole sort of ministry of prayer, which you call Pray for Five. What's Pray for Five, and what's the role of prayer in evangelism and sharing our faith? And why is that so important? And how do you try and develop that side of work? Because obviously skills and questions and talking is one side of it, but you mentioned at the start of this podcast that conversion of other people isn't down to us, it's the work of the Holy Spirit. So talk to us about Prayer for Five and what that is about.
Yes, it's kind of 7 different touch points that we think about with the church, 7 different areas to explore, and one of them is about prayer. So are we regularly praying for people to come to faith? I find that in many churches, we're really good at praying for big things. We're good at praying for government or politics or world issues, or somebody in the church is struggling with a health thing, really good at praying for that kind of stuff. But how often are we praying by name people to experience God? And I think, so the Pray for Five is a very simple thing. It's having 5 people to pray for regularly. People are doing it all over the place. It's very common. But I've also discovered that many Christians don't really know how to pray for 5. And what does it mean to really pray for somebody? Am I praying they become just like me? Am I praying they believe everything just as I believe everything? I don't think we are. I think we're praying that ultimately they have an experience of who God is. an experience of what Jesus has done for them. And so for me, it gives you a few different ideas of what you might do practically around that to really help them to work out, how can I pray regularly and make it a habit of praying? So again, the idea I shared earlier on about breathing in and breathing out. As we're breathing in and spending time alone with the Father, actually, how are we also praying for our friends, our neighbours, our connections? And how do we make this part of our church culture by even on a Sunday morning or at house groups, we are bringing these up again to kind of pray for each other as we're praying and just to encourage each other on that journey as well.
Mm.
You mentioned a moment ago the engaging with culture, and so we're creating a culture of evangelism, but that's meeting sort of the culture of the world around us. And a few years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, there was the rise of a lot of that's very strident atheism, very antagonistic, and it just seemed like people were just there was no way through. People were not interested. But it seems that there is some kind of a cultural shift that we're hearing about and seeing in many places, a kind of new openness to the gospel. People just kind of walking into church and they get there like no one's told them about anything. They just felt this compulsion to come to church. So there's the spiritual openness. Do you think that there's, are you seeing that, or is it over exaggerated? Could you maybe give us a few thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I was with a church again last week. They've had 3 people turn up at church just randomly. So that's definitely happening more and more so. There's a piece of research done by the Evangelical Alliance, which comes out in June, which has found 2 of the major things are, first of all, it's people having spiritual experiences and just wanting to understand what's going on. I was even chatting to a lady the other week, and her husband died recently. She talked about how she felt his presence go through her at the grave. Really interesting kind of conversation on the back of that. What does that mean, and what's that? How do we unpack that? But so definitely it's spiritual experiences, and second of all, it's people reading scripture. So we've just actually launched, based in London, we just launched a new Mark's Gospel with Hope. When I say a new Mark's Gospel, we haven't rewritten it, just kind of designed it with some pictures of London and things to really help engage. And we're finding actually just having a stand on the street saying free Bible, people are actually picking them up and reading them and engaging. So it's exciting happening there. So there's definitely something happening. I think the challenge is how do we then as a church community really welcome people in and having to unpack these spiritual experiences or unpack what the Word of God means for them. And I think we've often haven't worked out what does that discipleship journey look for them going forward? How do we really come alongside them to nurture them in that journey as they discover more of who they are and who God is?
Wonderful. And you've been involved in leading this ministry. Is it since 2008? Is that when you
That's right. Yeah. So a good few years now. Yeah.
Now, that's a long shift. That's not a kind of a try it for a couple of years and back out. That's serious. You've seen a lot of cultural change, a lot of shifts, the new atheism rising, falling, but you're still going. That's what keeps you going in evangelism, because it's not always easy. It's hard to do it. It's hard to fund it. It's hard to keep pressing on. There's some discouragements. There's spiritual warfare. What has kept you going and the long haul in this mission? Why haven't you dropped the ball?
I think so. During COVID times, I ran something called Pray London. We prayed across the capital for all kinds of things. We prayed for, doctors and nurses, for the police force, for all kinds of social needs. Whenever you end up praying for things, you end up, at the heart of it all, you've got to pray for people to come to know Jesus. And to be honest, we want to see our nation transformed and changed. We do all kinds of nice things and great cultural shifts. We can do all kinds of things politically and other ways as well. But actually, people's hearts aren't being shifted and changed. We're never going to see this nation changed. And so for me, that's the core kind of business. And so ultimately, as I discover for myself afresh each day what the gospel means to me, is how do I share this good news message and allow others to have their lives turned upside down? And because of that, then shape the world around us.
Very good. Very good. So there's so much you guys do. I really encourage people to go check out the website. But what are, maybe if you could just share one of the things that you're involved with at the moment that is you find most inspiring to you and to the team you work with? I
think one of the things I'm really enjoying now, we're in London, we're doing something called a mission week in June, July time. This year across London. It's about 140 churches so far signed up to be involved. And what's really exciting about it all is that it's been born out of these regional kind of meals where we've brought together different cultures in London. So my friend Gurma Bishaw from the London Project has brought together leaders from Southeast Asia who are based in London now, from South America who are based in London now, from across Europe, and basically just kind of wrestle with what it means for them in this kind of context and doing mission. So we've committed to doing a week of mission together in June, July time. And what's beautiful is it's all these different cultures in London working together. And there's something really powerful when you have the Nigerian church and the Hong Kong church, as well as the traditional Methodist church or Anglican church, working collaboratively in faith sharing, because it paints a picture, I think, almost of a revelation of that picture of every knee and every tongue. And so for me, there's something beautiful, I think, just as we come together as different churches from different streams to work collaboratively in sharing who Jesus is.
Yeah, that's great.
That's wonderful, and a really good note to kind of bring things into land on. Our 20 minutes has gone. Before we hang up the call, though, remind us again of where your website is, where we can find all the stuff about you, and also you mentioned earlier on those prompt cards. If people want to get those prompt cards for themselves or their house group or their church, or if they are a pastor who's listening today who says, I actually need to get on board with this, I want the Emmaus Road stuff to turn my church around, where can they find you, prompt cards, the Emmaus Road program? Where can they go to find all that?
Everything is on the one website. So it's sharejesusinternational.com, sharejesusinternational.com. And from there, you'd find different things we're doing. So you've got 3 different icons on the front. If you're an individual, if you're a church, you can click on those things and work out how best we can serve you. And we've got a new course called Sharing Jesus coming out in a few weeks' time again, which Andy Bannister's written for as well. So it's fantastic. So looking forward to having that out there.
That's terrific. Thank you so much. That was a really excellent, very helpful and encouraging 20 minutes. Do appreciate so much your time in joining us. May God bless you in your ministry and your work. It's terrific. It's encouraging, really good stuff to be involved with. Go across and check out the website, sharejesusinternational.com. Andy, thank you so much for joining us. That was terrific. And thank you, Steve, for steering us through the last few minutes. We will be back in a fortnight with another exciting guest to encourage us and inspire us to share the gospel with a world in need. Thank you for joining us and see you next time. Goodbye.